At least 3 people have died in an Israeli airstrike on a refugee camp in central Gaza. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has arrived in Paris to join French President Macron for an armistice ceremony. Several people have been killed and dozens injured in Russian strikes on the Ukrainian cities of Mykolaiv and Zaporizhia.
Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz says he's willing to hold a confidence vote before the end of the year after his ruling coalition collapsed.
At least 3 people have died in an Israeli strike on the Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza. The strike hit a tent sheltering a displaced family, wounding 2 children and killing their parents, one of which was a photojournalist. Around 24 people were wounded in the attack and taken to the Auda hospital in Nuseirat, according to the head of the hospital's ambulance service. As Israel intensifies its military campaign in northern Gaza, hundreds of Palestinians are also fleeing Jabalia, where an Israeli strike on a house killed at least 32 people over the weekend. Meanwhile, Israel's Air Force attacked an aid convoy and forced the closure of Syria's main north-south highway, according to the country's state media. Yemen's Houthi rebels also claimed to have launched a missile at northern Israel, which the IDF says was intercepted. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has arrived in Paris to join French President Emmanuel Macron for a ceremony marking the 106th anniversary of the armistice. Their meeting signifies a celebration of the 2 countries' friendship, as nations across the world pay tribute to their fallen soldiers in World War I. This year also marks the 120th anniversary of the Entente Cordiale, the historic agreement between France and the United Kingdom. Starmer was personally invited to Paris by Emmanuel Macron, and the 2 leaders are expected to discuss a number of foreign policy issues, including the war in Ukraine and the conflict in the Middle East. The trip marks a significant step in Starmer's plans to reset relations with the European Union following the UK's exit in 2020. 5 people have died and several injured following a Russian drone strike on Ukraine's southern city of Mykolaiv. The city's mayor, Alexander Senkevich, said Russia attacked overnight using kamikaze drones, destroying a house and damaging a residential building which set alight. Meanwhile, in Zaporizhia, 1 person has died and at least 21 wounded in 3 separate Russian strikes that damaged residential buildings. Residents are being evacuated and rescue operations are still ongoing. The attacks come as Russia launched its largest overnight drone strike on Ukraine since the start of the full-scale invasion, with Ukrainian air defences detecting a record 145 drones on Saturday night. Ukraine is continuing to return fire, launching a massive drone strike on Moscow and its suburbs overnight into Sunday.
COP28 President Sultan Ahmed Al-Jaber led the opening ceremony of COP29 here in Baku, where over 20,000 people have registered to attend the climate summit. He officially handed over the presidency to Azerbaijan. In his speech, he not only highlighted progress made during the previous term, but he also emphasized the role of the COP presidency troika, a collaboration between COP28, COP29, COP30 that was launched last year. This marks the first time that presidencies have joined forces. Later we heard from COP29 President-elect Babayev, who described this a moment of truth for the Paris Agreement, and then the UN climate chief, who stressed the importance of reaching an agreement on the new climate financial goal. Several topics and talking points are being discussed on the summit's first day, which are already setting the agenda for COP29, from the issue of loss and damage to climate challenges faced by small island states, and on the political front, the impact of the US elections on climate talks. Giorgio Orlandi for Euronews in Baku.
In der Woche davor.
Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz has said he's willing to hold a confidence vote in Parliament before the end of the year after the ruling three-party coalition collapsed. In an interview on Sunday night with public broadcaster ARD, Scholz said, "I'm not glued to my post." He'd originally scheduled the vote for the 15th of January, but in the face of increasing pressure is now considering holding it this year, paving the way for snap elections. Scholz is widely expected to lose the vote. In that case, President Frank-Walter Steinmeier will have 21 days to dissolve the Bundestag, and fresh elections must take place within 60 days of Parliament's closure. Scholz also denied he'd provoked the coalition's collapse, saying he'd done everything he could to keep it together. The so-called traffic light coalition collapsed on the 6th of November after Scholz fired Finance Minister Christian Lindner. Speaking to the press at the time, Scholz said Lindner had broken his trust too many times. The coalition had been at odds for some time, particularly over economic and fiscal policy. Authorities in Valencia have ruled out any imminent resignations from the regional government as anger continues to grow over the response to catastrophic flooding. Thousands of people staged a protest on Saturday night, accusing the regional government of sending out public warnings about the dangers of the flooding too slowly. A group of protesters demanding the resignation of regional president Carlos Mazon clashed with riot police in front of the city hall. The EFE news agency said at least 31 police officers were injured in the violence. But the region's vice president said no one would be stepping down, as to do so would be a betrayal of the victims. At least 222 people have been killed in Spain's worst natural disaster in decades. The flooding started after torrential rain lashed the eastern region of Valencia on the 29th of October, with some areas receiving a year's worth of rain in just 8 hours. The central government in Madrid has mobilized thousands of troops and police officers to help with relief and cleanup operations. And thousands of ordinary citizens have also stepped up to help, with no definite estimate as to exactly how many have come forward. The full extent of the damage is unknown, but Spain's Consortium for Insurance Compensation estimates that it will pay out at least €3.5 billion in compensation.
The Portuguese Parliament has approved an extension of initial parental leave. The fully paid 4-month leave can now be extended to 6 months, while the part-paid 5 months can be extended to 7. Although this initiative passed in a general vote, it still requires further discussion by a parliamentary commission. And with the ongoing national budget deliberations, it's unlikely that the measure will be approved by the end of the year. Government parties voted against the proposal, but opposition parties in support of the measure highlighted a range of reasons, from the need for parental support in newborn care to the promotion of birth rates.
Esta medida penso que é muito importante no sentido de facilitar a vida dos pais no acompanhamento dos primeiros momentos do nascimento do seu filho e do desenvolvimento dos seus filhos. Isso é muito importante, mas eu não diria que esta medida é uma medida promotora da natalidade. Os resultados vêm a acontecer a médio ou longo prazo. Os resultados imediatos, em termos da natalidade, só se conseguem via imigração.
In 6 decades, the birth rate has fallen by about 60%, from 217,000 births in 1964 to 85,000 in 2023. The low birth rate in Portugal will not be reversed with more leave time, but it provides invaluable support in balancing professional and family life.
Tive 2 meses a trabalho em part-time, agora vou estar 1 mês só dedicada às minhas filhas e vou estar depois mais 2 meses de trabalho a part-time. Isto faz com que seja uma vantagem, sobretudo para as mulheres, porque é uma forma de podermos voltar ao trabalho, à vida profissional, sem voltar àqueles horários mais pesados. Acho que é muito importante que nos deem condições, não só à mãe, mas também ao pai, para podermos estar mais tempo com os nossos filhos quando eles são muito pequenos, porque é nessa idade que eles precisam efetivamente de nós.
Daniela won't benefit from the extension if and when it's approved, but the measure will allow future parents to spend more time with their children at home with a reduced impact on the family budget.
A iniciativa legislativa que propõe o alargamento da licença parental ainda terá que ser discutida em sede de comissão parlamentar. Mas a medida não está contemplada no Orçamento de Estado para 2025 e o Governo já veio avisar que custaria mais 230 milhões de euros, elevando a despesa da licença para 630 milhões. Joana Mourão Carvalho, para a Euronews, em Lisboa.
Riot police clashed with demonstrators at an anti-fascist march in Bologna on Saturday. Around 200 anarchists joined the 1,000 or so anti-fascist demonstrators. The march was organised by left-wing groups, near to where a far-right march was taking place against crime and what its organisers described as degradation in Italy. Police fired tear gas and blocked the streets where the far-right groups were marching. The demonstrations happened a week before elections are held in the Emilia-Romagna region. The current president of the regional government is Irene Priolo, who is from the centre-left. She took over from Stefano Bonaccini, who became a member of the European Parliament in July.
US President-elect Donald Trump has announced that his former Director of Immigration Enforcement, Tom Homan, will serve as the border czar in his new administration. Homan was widely expected to be offered a position related to the border following Trump's pledge to launch the largest deportation operation in the country's history. Homan has told US media that ICE will move to implement Trump's plans in a humane manner.
Donald Trump's team has dismissed remarks by a Republican strategist that the new administration's plan to end the war in Ukraine is about peace and not territory. In an interview with the BBC, Brian Lanza claimed that the incoming Trump government didn't see restoring lost territory as a priority. But a spokesperson for the president-elect said Lanza didn't speak for Trump. On the campaign trail, Trump claimed he could end the war in Ukraine within a day without explaining how. But he also hasn't ruled out the possibility that Kyiv may have to cede territory to Moscow to bring about an end to the war. Russia seized the Crimean Peninsula in 2024 and in 2022 annexed 4 areas of Ukraine without ever maintaining full control over any of them. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has repeatedly said the full withdrawal of Russia's forces and the return of all territory is a must if peace is to be established.
2 Germans set a new world record on Saturday by walking on a slack line stretched between 2 flying hot air balloons at a height of 2,500 meters during the performance at the German city of Riedering. Freddy Kuhner and Lucas Yemler shattered the previous record of 1,900 meters set in Brazil in 2021 by 600 meters. Cunha is best known for his records balancing on particularly high ropes without a safety device, while Lucas Yemler in 2019 gained fame for covering the longest distance in the world on a slack line, 2 kilometers long.
Geil! Wir sind wieder auf festem Boden, Mann. Das fühlt sich Hammer an, den Weltrekord endlich geknackt zu haben. Ich meine, wir haben so lange darauf hingefiebert und das jetzt endlich gemacht zu haben, ist schon ein bisschen surreal eigentlich.
The 2 friends are no strangers to the slackline scene and already hold several world records.
Euronews. The news